All right, folks. We've got a fabulous panel here. As we all know, and I think we heard it a couple times this morning, there is a tremendous amount going on at the moment in the West, right? Just such busy times. Between resource adequacy programs, transmission planning initiatives, market design proposals, it's really in some ways kind of hard to keep track of all the puzzle pieces, let alone figure out how they may all fit together over time. Each of my guests in this panel has a unique perspective on these issues and understands, I think, very well what's at stake as we work to strengthen coordination, collaboration in the West. And so I'm just extremely pleased and honored, first of all, to introduce Karen Douglas, Governor Newsom's Senior Advisor for Energy. Karen, great to see you. And really, then to her left, John Hairston, the Administrator of Bonneville Power Administration. Great to see you, John. Sarah Edmonds, the President and CEO of the Western Power Pool, and Jan Sputney-Jones, the CEO of the Independent Energy Producers Association. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. I sort of think about this conversation as sort of wide area state awareness, because I think each of the issues that each of my colleagues here are going to talk about really plays into an evolving set of activities that we really need to think about ultimately in a sort of a coherent way. And so I'm going to kick it right off to Karen. Karen, I think you're several months now into your new role as Governor Newsom's Senior Advisor for Energy. It's been a real pleasure working with you. I really appreciate your sort of can-do, action-oriented focus to the position. It's been fabulous. Can you just talk to us for a few minutes? What are Governor Newsom's top priorities for energy over the next few years? And what do you think are some of the critical success factors to make broader regional market coordination a reality?
All right, so thank you for the question and just orienting for a moment on where we are. I think we heard this in some of the earlier panels today. We're at a time of tremendous change and challenge and also opportunity as we look at the energy sector and how it's going to need to evolve, not slowly but quickly, and sometimes more quickly than probably any of us have been thinking about or really baking into our expectations and preparing for. And that's, of course, driven in part just by the impacts of climate change. It's really been hit home to us, not only here in California, but throughout the West, just how much more challenging it is to deal with this multi-year extreme drought, to deal with these West-wide heat events, the reduced hydropower, the stresses on the system that this is causing, and to do that in the process of also carrying out the energy transition that our climate goals and our basic obligations to the future and to address the challenge of climate change present. And so as we look at the energy sector, first of all, everybody here knows this, and I don't need to tell this to anybody, but the energy sector is a critical sector. It's absolutely an essential service, not only today, but as we look to the future and as we look at addressing climate change and the measures that we're looking at in California as we move to meet more and more aggressive climate goals. We're going to be seeing the electricity sector take on additional load as part of our decarbonization strategy. And so there was some discussion earlier about electric vehicles and about California's rules, which will phase down the sales of non-electric passenger vehicles until in 2035. They will not be sold in California. And we're also moving fast on building decarbonization. We're also looking at the electricity sector when it comes to heavier duty vehicles, when it comes to ports, and all of this is new load. All of this will require us to be a lot clearer and to provide opportunities and incentives and technologies that integrate these new loads into the system in a way that we can accommodate them. We have to plan for it, we have to know that it's coming, and we have to prepare to handle the changes to the system that these new loads will bring. So we're dealing with our climate mitigation, we are decarbonizing the system, we're looking towards increased loads, and we're dealing with these increasingly frequent extreme events that climate change is exacerbating throughout the West. And of course, we're also dealing with, we're coming out of a pandemic. We're dealing with some very significant supply chain challenges around the world. We're in a very different global environment than I think any of us would have imagined in 2019. So we're, we're in a moment of tremendous change. I think we all have to recognize that. As we look at meeting the challenges ahead, we come back to the basic principles or concepts of building out this clean energy grid of the future, achieving the energy transition in a way that also preserves affordability and in a way that protects reliability. And so when you ask what are the elements of a regional conversation, or for that matter, what are the elements of almost any policy that we're thinking about, we'll be thinking about, well, how does this affect the energy transition? Does it advance it? Does it, is it consistent? How does this impact reliability? Can we argue that it's helping us? How might it cause challenges? How can we address those challenges? What are the impacts on affordability? Are we able to realize savings for the ratepayers? Are we taking on costs that we could avoid? And so these are, as we move forward with this transition, we've got to keep all of that in balance. And so the last legislative session was a very major session in energy in California. We addressed, first of all, a significant climate package. Part of that package was to set a 2035 interim goal of a 90% clean energy system. And so we were already moving towards 100% by 2045. But having that interim goal really accelerates and it makes real the impact of decisions that we need to make today and in the next year or two in order to put us on a trajectory to meet that interim goal. So in addition to the significant climate package that the legislature enacted and the governor signed, we also pushed forward a very new set of state authorities around reliability to establish a strategic reliability reserve and state programs going along with that reserve, especially demand-side programs for reliability to deal with extreme events. We're going to continue building on and improving that work. And we also took the step, working with the legislature, to create a pathway to extend the life of the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant. That'll still need to go through some analysis and some process, but again, we're really looking towards the future. We're also looking year by year. What does it take to get this done? One thing, as we kind of reflect on everything that happened in the last session and in September and look forward at what we need to get done, we often talk about how we're in a time of implementation. A lot of the major policies that we needed to enact are in place. There certainly are more ideas and concepts we need to keep working on, but we're in a time of implementation. We're in a time of showing that we can get the work done. And so you're going to see a lot of focus on that from us.
Yep. Good. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, lots of, I would say, focus. So appreciate it. John, Bonneville, of course, has a long and I think very influential organization in the West, for years and years, and California and the Northwest, of course, have a long history of working together, even through some very difficult and challenging times over the years. Earlier this year, BPA joined the WAMs, obviously something we're very proud of at the ISO. But I know it's not the end of the story. I'm curious if you could just share with us a little bit, how has your experience been so far with EIM, and what are the key issues that you are evaluating as we now explore the move into day-ahead timeframe and potentially beyond?
All right. Well, thanks, Elliot, and appreciate you having me here. For those who don't know much about Bonneville, we are a wholesaler, so we have about 140 some odd customers that we sell, public customers. They have preference to our power. We market the electricity from 31 hydro projects on the Columbia and Snake River, and we have about 15,000 miles worth of high voltage transmission. So we're a pretty significant player when it comes to renewable energy. We're primarily hydro. We do have a nuclear plant that we also market from, CGS in Richland. And so, for us, when we go out into the market, that's really the carbon content of our product. Our unspecified purchases really brings carbon to the picture for us. As Elliot mentioned, we joined the EIM this year. We've seen some pretty, I think, favorable results. It was a lot of hard work. I want to, thank the ISO team for working with us and helping us get to that point, because this is our first movement into an organized market. And it's an important first step. If you look at what's been talked about today, there's a number of building blocks there. The first panel talked a little bit about EDAM and where we're going with the day ahead, but for us, the EIM was really that first step. Getting some experience in organized markets, understanding the dynamics and how we could actually bring value to those 140 some odd customers that we do have. Now, what we think is an important next step is something that I think Sarah talked about, is our resource adequacy program, the Western Resource Adequacy Program. I believe that for us to be able to meet the challenges that we have in the future, particularly around reliability and integrating variable resources, we're going to have to be able to speak a common language, understand what's available at any given time. So when we run into some of the issues that we've had, the challenges of heat events or cold snaps in the West, we're able to communicate, work together, and making sure that we meet those challenges, the types of stressful situations on the system that could cause blackouts. We've done, I think, a pretty good job thus far in meeting those challenges. I think the additional coordination that we're seeing through the EIM has helped that. However, I do think there's some additional things we can do, and I really do have a lot of optimism about what our resource adequacy program could bring. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that develop. I mean, when else have we seen all of these utilities in the West come together on a transparent basis to better understand how we can work together to meet reliability? I mean, that in itself is a tremendous first step. And so as we move through this process, like I said, there's a lot of optimism, I know, with myself and a number of folks with the Western Power Pool to be able to stand up this program and get a lot of benefit out of it. Now, the third step for us, at least from my perspective, is what was talked about a little earlier today, the movement towards a day-ahead market. Now, for Bonneville and some of the considerations that we're making, one, like I said, we want to make sure that we're getting value, that it's value being brought to our customers. And because of our nature, because we're just recovering our costs, we're non-profit, okay? So we just need to recover our costs. We want to make sure that we're bringing that value to our customers and keeping our rates low. That's important. The other I mentioned is the preference that we have with our customers. We have to make sure that we're meeting our statutory obligations. So first and foremost, when we evaluate anything, particularly governance, we have to make sure that we have that flexibility, that we can meet those statutory requirements to our customers. So that's going to be an important key. The other is looking at the operation and reliability of the system. If we're going to move into markets, we have to make sure it's a plus one, right? It's making a positive impact on what we're seeing in the operation of the system, the efficiencies, and our ability to maintain reliability. That's key. And then I would say the other key component for me is making sure at the end of the day, we've got an opportunity for our customers to feel comfortable about where we're headed in terms of an organized, potentially RTO. That next step that we take has to be able to lead to the type of setup and structure that would make a potential RTO workable for us. So, as we consider, opportunities as we move forward, I think those are kind of the basic building blocks I'm thinking through, and I know a number of our customers are also thinking through as we move forward. The only other thing I would mention is that as we talk about markets, we often talk about design. That's important. Where's the value going to be? First step, we got to have a great design. But the other thing we talk about is governance. You got to have some individual decision-making flexibility there, okay? And that's important. The first panel I thought did a great job talking about a lot of the benefits that we're seeing through the EDAM development process, which we're participating in. But what was a little silent was the fact that there's another process in place with the Southwest Power Pool in terms of their Markets Plus process. And, as we look at governance, you look at the two areas, and it was really great to hear the perspectives, and I think even one of our perspectives was from our largest customer, saying that the current structure that they're seeing on the ISO front is sufficient for them, and that's important to know. Those are important things to express, because as we go through, we all have different decision-making points that we have to, think through. But I've shared that for us, the EIM is, the current design is really workable for us because of the voluntary nature of the EIM market. If we see things going in a certain direction that doesn't meet our statutory obligations, then we have the flexibility to maybe move. But as you make more investments, as you make deeper investments in markets, you have to make sure that those next subsequent steps are workable. And so as we look at comparing the markets, we're going to be really keen on that flexibility that we see in the governance structure. But the important point is that we can come up with all the great market design, structures, governance, et cetera. But if we don't think about deliverability, we're going to miss a big component of efficiency and the ability to have a successful market. We have to talk about transmission. We have to talk about what investments are important to make and how that cost allocation will take place. If you look at Bonneville, we have pretty low transmission rates. So if you start talking about bringing together an RTO and melding some of those costs, well, what will that mean for our customers? Are they going to be paying higher transmission costs? And will they be footing the bill for additional investments? So we have to work through all of those issues, I think, in making, I think, a next really strong step in terms of market development, whether it's the ISO or SPP.
Yeah, thanks, John. I've just been super appreciative of, your sort of clarity of how you're thinking about things, what's really important to you, and also just having your staff continue to stay engaged with everything else that's going on. So it's been really helpful, and I really appreciate you being here. So fabulous. So Sarah, can't resist. Congratulations again on your appointment as the president and CEO of the Western Power Pool. I just can't think of a better person to be in that role. It's been great to see your evolution. So congrats again. And it's also just been impressive, frankly, watching the evolution of the Northwest Power Pool into the Western Power Pool, and now the advent of the Western Resource Adequacy Program. I think we're all familiar with the WRAP acronym. So can you just give us a sense of what's the very latest on the development of the program? And can you speak to the importance of and the pathways to establishing interoperability between WRAP and the emerging day-ahead markets?
Thanks, Elliot. I really appreciate that. You've been a very important mentor to me along this journey. The journey for the region, though, really has been going on for quite some time. We've been at this, putting this particular resource adequacy puzzle together for 3+ years. Cue the map, please. I also want to say that our current status is awaiting a FERC order, hopefully an order approving RAP. That's docket ER 222762. So already gave a heads up to FERC staff. We are also in a process of doing a lot of extensive outreach to our current participants. The footprint of those current participants is shown right here. We're talking to them about upcoming funding commitments and commitments around the timing of their participation in this West-wide resource adequacy program. And I hope from the map you can truly see the potential for this first of its kind West-wide RA program. We've had really a tremendous amount of success because this effort has been from its very start industry-led. We have a very diverse community. We have investor-owned utilities. We have Bonneville Power Administration as a participant. We have significant participation of public power, and I think that's really one of the distinctive features of this community. And all along the way, we've made space for stakeholder and state regulator, state agency voices in this journey. This is a first of its kind regional resource adequacy program that has planning and compliance functions outside of an independent system operator. So for that reason, it's quite unique. Western Power Pool facilitates RAP. We have a program operator. Southwest Power Pool provides the technical and analytic services that we need to run RAP. It has two primary functions. It has a winter and summer focused forward showing program, which is evaluating each participant's obligation for capacity to meet a loss of load expectation of 1 day event in 10 years. We're applying consistent standard reliability metrics and counting rules to this analysis, and we're requiring a threshold showing of transmission to support the deliverability of source-specific resources in forward showing. We couple that with an operational program, which is, as we're getting closer and closer to the operational day, we're assessing of the participants who's coming in surplus relative to their forward showing, who's coming in deficit to those requirements, thereby identifying who has a right, a priority access call to that RA capacity pool, and who has an obligation to supply to that pool. All of this is supported by an independent governance structure, which its true hallmark being a truly independent board, multiple committees and opportunities for stakeholders and state agencies to have a voice and a representation in that process. I want to emphasize that no one is making us do this. We're not standing up RAP because of any law or mandate. It's because it is what industry felt was the right thing to do, the necessary thing to do to address a lot of the challenges that both Karen and John have already mentioned. We've got a changing resource mix, load profile mix, increasing insecurity about the depth of the spot market. We need help getting through extreme weather events. We have a lot of clean energy laws and goals to meet. RAP is really a recognition that we cannot do this by ourselves. We absolutely must seek the biggest, baddest, broadest footprint that we can so that we can deliver the value proposition of RAP, which really is, at its core, increased reliability and situational awareness that can only come from advanced, coordinated planning of resources with the opportunity to seize potential resource and cost savings because of the diversity benefit that a footprint like this can provide. So RAP has a lot of potential. It's new, it's exciting, still fragile. We must work to protect that value proposition. And when it comes to considering what among our members want to do in terms of the future of the market, we really do need to ask ourselves those questions about what does interoperability of RAP and markets and vice versa, because it's a two-way street, how is that going to work in a way that we're ensuring we're delivering on that reliability promise, as well as the ability to deliver the diversity benefits and seize that value proposition for our participants.
Fabulous. Yeah, well, congrats again on all the progress. And so I'm going to turn to Jan. I'm sure many of you here in the audience probably know Jan. Jan, it's always great to see you. Always appreciate your perspective. You were, some people may not know, Jan was actually an original member of the CAISO board back in the 90s and has lived through, I would say, all of the key chapters in the evolution of Western electricity market. And so, Jan, with all the discussion about regional market evolution at play, what's your sense of where we are as a region? What's it going to take to bring some of these different puzzle pieces together into a more coherent whole?
Well, thank you. I would like to thank you for that question, but I'm not. But there's really, I think we're at a point, having gone through several transitions, that we need to kind of focus on the fact that we're in a major transition in the energy sector as a whole in the West, where these mechanisms, these markets we're creating, can actually help quite a bit, but also present a significant challenge. I think, obviously, I think Karen did a great job of laying out. There's a lot of policies in California that are driving a significant amount of investment into clean resources, which I think is a very positive thing. We have a need to continue to maintain the reliability of the system, which came to the week of heat we had in September, and the Northwest had what was it, the hot dome or whatever, the heat dome of 2021. So these are all very important issues that need to be dealt with in terms of moving forward with the new technologies that we have, while at the same time maintaining very high levels of reliability and affordability. Now that sounds like, yeah, that's obvious, but it's not, and it's hard to do. Okay, so I think we have to, in the West, on the planet, we have to do two things well at once. One is basically lower our carbon footprint, manage the carbon we produce, and I use the word manage, not, I'm a believer that we're going to have to do a better job of figuring out how we're actually going to pull that off. And the second is, and I think Karen indicated, we have to adapt to the fact that the impacts of climate change, which have been developing over the last 250 years, are here now. We got big fires, we got these heat events. So then the question is, well, how do we deal with that? So a couple of just observations about kind of what I've heard here and also a little bit this morning. So the most immediate thing in terms of the RA issue that you just heard about is a big deal. After the energy crisis in 2000, 2001, FERC issued a must offer for the entire West. That led to some litigation at FERC. And about 2004, there was a series of alphabet soups showing up in terms of different ways that the ISO was trying to patch up ICPM, TCPM, and whatever. There's a colleague from the PUC, we were reminiscing about the creation of those issues at the ISO. The California PUC adopted 380 was a piece of legislation, an RA program here too. Well, okay, great, those are there. Sometimes they mesh pretty well, sometimes they don't, and I think we're working on that. We have a slice a day that we're trying to put into place that will identify the differences of what resources can do throughout the day without going through any of that. My big question is, how well is that going to fit with what we just heard in terms of RAP? Okay, and I don't know. Okay, and I'm hoping there's a lot more conversations going on here than are obvious, because I think the last thing we want to do is create additional friction in a market that we're all going to be dependent upon in terms of moving power around. So that would be the first key. The reliability issue, I think, is really key. I think our policymakers here, we focus a lot on demand response, which I'm all for. We respect, but the reality is that we did get through an energy storm with an Amber Alert that was brilliant when we did it. There was 800 megawatts of diesel that kicked in, which if you got to do it, you got to do it. But that we can't move forward in a system that way. And I think other regions are facing the same problem. I don't know that there's a lot of excess power floating around the West, and God help us if we're all hot at the same time. So I think that's key there. And so I think the reality there is trying to have a conversation West-wide about what that resource base looks like. And if you get to page 139 of your after action report, which was very good in terms of this is what happened, you get to the fact that there was 26,000 megawatts of natural gas plants operating in California at 7 p.m. on September 6th. You don't read about that in the papers. You don't, and I think that's true around the West in terms of what the resource base looks like. So then the question is, as we are moving to a transition where there's less and less fossil, and our planning documents say it's still going to be there, what's that plan? How is that going to work? How are we going to share resources over multiple hours? So, I think that there's key there is in trying to find out, again, a more transparent mechanism. I think you mentioned this morning, if you can actually see that other people have resources that we can move around the West, that's important. I think California probably helped a lot in the heat storms that have happened several times in the past, because fortunately, as I said earlier, we're not all experiencing the same problems at the same time. But I'm really worried about the kind of losing sight of not creating new friction where friction doesn't currently exist.
Yeah, I know there's a lot there to unpack. We only have about 13 minutes left, so I'm not going to call this a speed round, but I'm going to I've got another 4 or 5 questions I'd like to get through, so we'll kind of pepper you guys each. And I want to pick up a little bit, Sarah, with you, kind of off a little bit of what Jan was talking about you talk about interoperability with EDAM. I want to talk just a little bit about interoperability on RA side. And again, it's a sort of take the Hippocratic oath. We want to make sure that the RAP, succeeds and is on its way through its tariff process, et cetera. But just yesterday at the RIF, it was interesting to hear a pretty substantive conversation. I was quite pleased. Rebecca Sexton was there. We had Peter from PG&E. It was a really good conversation. So just tap just for a couple minutes on some of the key issues around RA interoperability, because that's going to be critical over time as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a two-way street. We've seen this issue coming for a number of months. It's time to get to the details. So Western Power Pool and our staff, we run thin, but we run fast. We're ready to engage on those details. And really, for us, it's about revisiting. Are we mixing markets and RAP in a way that maintains that value proposition? And so to that end, in partnership with our participants committee, we have developed a set of principles. The themes of these sets of principles to attack this issue include making sure that we're protecting and promoting participation in RAP so we can keep this footprint, making sure that we're honoring and respecting the governance of RAP, that we are preserving, protecting the benefit proposition, the diversity benefits, the value proposition, that we are honoring, preserving, protecting the supply and deliverability commitments made by the participants in their forward showing. These principles are going to help us navigate, and Jan, to your question, we're just starting these conversations, and I hope to really dig in soon on them. But they raise certain questions relative to the proposals that are out there in the West now, and flavors of these themes could include, can the market design demonstrate confidence that an obligation of a RAP participant in one market footprint can be exported at the same quality of supply and transmission deliverability to the participant of RAP in another market footprint? Can that export be honored in a way that those commitments and that value is maintained? Another question would be, if a RAP participant in a market will also be evaluated for resource sufficiency, does that resource sufficiency evaluation subject them to any different or incremental requirements? And if so, does that have any impact on the way that RAP participant is evaluating their participation in RAP? Are they getting fully recognized, or at least the maximum amount of recognition for the commitments they're making for resource adequacy in their market? And then finally, and this is my last one, it's a little bit more broad, what can we do to start and commit to conversations in the region among resource adequacy programs so that we're working to promote collaboration and, at a minimum, understanding, but also the potential for harmonization? How can we leverage our respective organizations, our state regulators, state agencies, all of these stakeholders, WEC, FERC, how can we utilize this collective so that we can get to the heart of those questions and, at least, as I said, get to understanding, but maybe even more potential for coordination?
Yeah, it's really well stated. I was quite encouraged yesterday just watching folks sort of clicking and double clicking on some of these issues. So it seems like we're starting to finally get some good substantive momentum to taking them on. So thanks for getting those principles articulated. John, I want to go to you as well on, you talked about deliverability, transmission. Bonneville, of course, is really this, in many ways, sort of central actor on transmission up in the Northwest. And I was sort of curious, what just to give us a quick glimpse into what are some of the central transmission issues that you guys are grappling with right now up in the Northwest, and are there any elements of the 20-year transmission outlook that Neil talked about in the last panel that either could be beneficial or that you're already exploring up in the Northwest?
Yeah, so I think for us, there's a couple of challenges. One, we're getting a lot of transmission requests, integration requests. They're stacking up pretty quick, and the resources that we have to go through and clear the queues are not enough. So we're going to be considering changes in our policy. I've mentioned moving forward, we're looking at adopting the concept of first ready, first served. We think that's going to help us in terms of clearing the queue of some of the requests that really won't come to fruition. But, I think all of this lends itself to the fact that we've got to do things quicker and better. Now, the prior panel talked a little bit about, getting to a point where some of the regulations were slowing things down and we had to kind of work through that. I honestly think that we've got great planners. We've got folks who are thinking through and identifying the needs around transmission. But, we have to be honest with ourselves, is that once we get to the discussion around, okay, who's going to pay for it? That's when it really slows down. Okay, we know what we need, but it's who's going to pay for it? And so there's a couple of ways to look at it. There's opportunities. You see things coming out of, the Infrastructure Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, incentives. But, I've been asking the question as to what role should, say, Bonneville Power play or federal government play in helping us get beyond that kind of, I think the way we've been conditioned to avoid that marginal cost, potential stranded investment, and get us building a lot more, a lot faster, making the investments. We're seeing a lot of requests for renewables, solar, wind, and the challenges for Bonneville is getting that into the Portland area, the Seattle area. So we've got some projects that we think are going to help with that. We also have challenges in the Tri-Cities, the Richland area, in terms of transmission access to get generation in there. And we've got some reinforcement projects that I think are going to be really helpful to that. But the long game needs to be, how do we make the right investments at the right time in a timely fashion? And then the last thing I'll mention is that, we did a good job keeping the system up and running. But is that the way we would really want to keep it up and running, getting amber alerts and, worrying about not touching the line, getting, hey, can you guys leave the intertie alone? We need those megawatts coming through. Or should we make an investment no different than what we did 80 years ago when we stood up the Bonneville Power Administration? It was about building for the future. It was about rural electrification. It was about having the capacity for folks to grow into. And right now, the system is basically a 16-year-old kid wearing 8-year-old clothes, right? We need to get bigger clothes. We've got to get bigger shoes and let folks grow into it. That's what we do with our kids. We need to be able to do that with the system. And I think it's going to take a lot more investment and the ability to get folks to move and take that incremental step.
Yeah, well, I think you won't get a lot of disagreement that many of us hope we never get another amber alert in the middle of a heat wave. But yeah, and building, and I've appreciated the way that you guys are leaning in on transmission. Karen, I'm gonna hold the last question for you, but I just wanted to just acknowledge, I think we've seen a similar recognition here in California. Neil talked a lot about it just in the last couple of years, just that inflection point, just the magnitude of new resource that has to come online to be able to go faster and take friction out of the system. It's really critical. Jan, I wanted to go back to you real quickly. Because you've been watching the evolution of the energy market for so many years and have such insight into how things are, can you just talk just briefly, we've got about 5 minutes left in the panel, what are a couple of the critical areas of additional evolution that you think are going to be necessary in energy and capacity pricing and contracting to support reliability and affordability going forward? Is there anything else from the IEPA perspective that you'd want to kind of get out there that we need to be thinking about?
Well, since we represent one of just about everybody, so we have, gas, the solar with storage, standalone wind, biomass, and some small hydro. We're really interested in making sure that we can actually accomplish what's on the plate. So factually, the energy sector in California is at 47% below 1990 levels. We're kind of winning. It's the only sector that's actually reduced climate change goals. About half of that was the modernization of the old gas fleet, which allowed us to shut down older plants and add and basically phase out coal. And the rest was due to a very competitive market for wind and solar, which drove prices way down. So we have a good base to play on. Storage went from next to nothing in California 2 or 3 years ago to over 4,000 megawatts. Fong Wong and I were on a panel 12 years ago that identified that as a game changer. That turns to be true. Okay, so that's all good. And I think that's similar to what's going on in the rest of the region, but how to get it to market, and that was the question that was just asked here. We do not have the transmission to do it, so one of the key things is basically figuring out, away from planning, how we actually get this stuff built and quickly. Because we're not going to meet any of these goals if we can't get the renewable energy for where it is to market. And I think the best way to do that is on a broader regional basis that basically takes advantage of the resources we have throughout the West, share those resources in a way that actually keeps the investments we're making affordable and reliable.
Sort of more broadly now, kind of is the summary. Yeah, good. All right, Karen, I'm going to turn the last question to you. We just went through, I think many of us together, one of the most challenging events in the history of the California grid, and for many others, a very challenging moment, the peak all-time record load in the history of the Western Interconnection. Right? It was a tough heat wave in September. Of course, as John just mentioned, we managed to keep the lights on by accessing every last megawatt and negawatt of capability available to us, as well as, I think, pretty remarkable coordination, collaboration within California and across the West. I was just curious, what are the one or two most important lessons that you took away from the heat wave? We heard a little bit about this earlier today, and what do you think were the implications for broader regional coordination and market development?
So, couple things on that, and first, just bouncing off of what Jan said and some of the themes that we've heard, as we look forward, someone this morning used the word like more. We need more clean, we need to get it online faster. We need to be really focused. And so the difference it made when you look at the difference between 2020 when we did have outages versus 2022 when we had a 10-day record-setting heat event with record-setting peak loads that were beyond 6 gigawatts beyond 2020. One of the major things that made a difference was that we had much more new installed capacity, including those batteries that Jan mentioned, 3,500 megawatts of battery capacity that wasn't there before. It made a huge difference. And so as we think about reliability and we think going forward, short term, medium term, long term, accelerate getting these resources, accelerate getting the transmission, accelerate so that we can have the capacity and have the transmission to meet the demand growth and to be able to deal with these extreme events. And so that's a focus, period. When it comes to what else was so important about the September event, the work that we were able to put into learning from 2020, learning from the challenges in 2021 when the bootleg fire shut down transmission from Oregon, and we lost all those megawatts, and we also had to scramble for days. The collaboration, the coordination, the fact that it was absolutely hot throughout the West, but it wasn't equally hot everywhere at the same time. Now, that was in part luck, but it was in part just the fact that it's a very large footprint with a lot of coordination and a lot of resources, and that helped tremendously. The way that we were able to, in a very organized fashion, just call on everybody. We were calling on large customers. We were calling on the CCAs and the IOUs and, literally everybody for every megawatt. And people responded, and people came up with creative ideas. Department of Water Resources, for example, not only did they administer our strategic reserve resources, but they also, they somehow managed to squeeze hundreds of megawatts of additional generation from their from their hydro plant by just doing all kinds of things to just be able to make it happen. And I think one thing I really take away is that as we assess what happened and as we start to go back and talk to people who played a role, people stepped up. They were glad to step up. They have ideas for how we can do better. We want to hear them. We want to continue to build on that because we activated a tremendous network and people responded and it made the difference. And it's really kind of fun to be able to go back to people and say, what you did mattered. And everybody knows that because it's true, because it came down to every last megawatt. And so, I think that we all see the challenges in front of us. We all see that climate change is really changing the game. It's greatly increased the risks that all of us face. So it's kind of that spirit of collaboration, coordination, planning, creativity. Think about what you can do, and if you get pushed to the end of what that is, actually what's next, and is there something else? And then think about just operationally, okay, if we were to try to do that, how would we do it? And how would we communicate, and can we get that in place? And so we learned a lot. We keep learning. We really want to be talking to people, to be coordinating. We worked extremely closely with the CAISO, obviously, across state government and with stakeholders and with the IOUs and with the other balancing authorities and just everywhere. But we're going to need to do more of that. We think everyone's going to need to do more of that, and we're very much all in on that conversation.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I think that for me, just September was just such a incredibly illuminating moment of our interdependencies. And I just think I really appreciate, all the work that everybody's doing, all of you guys at RAP, BPA, Jan, your work, and Karen, it's great to have you in that seat and working with us as we really explore just what I think is a moment of tremendous opportunity for greater coordination. So thank you guys again, really appreciate it. And I think I am going to just please join me in a round of applause for our panelists. Done a wonderful job. Thank you guys.